Hey there guys, welcome back to Boots and Bounty Homestead. My name is Casey and I hope we have lots of new friends watching this video. If you're not already a subscriber, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell so you can get all the goodies that we intend to share with you guys. So in the last video, I kind of explained the basics of why do you grow certain vegetables during certain seasons. Basic knowledge, basic kind of thinking back in history. Well, just why do you grow that during the wintertime? Why do you grow that during the summertime? So if you haven't seen that one, go back and watch it real quick. And then come back and we're going to get started in kind of a rotational garden that I plan on setting up. And this may help some of you as well. Now, this does not pertain to some of the northern states or some of the hotter states. This is going to be right in that middle zone between lower 5 and upper 8. This is going to pertain to some of those that this will help kind of get you thinking on how the heck do I plant my garden. So first of all, I am experimenting with growing year round. I am in between zones 7A, 7B. I can pretty much plant anything from zone 6 to 8. So I want to do year-round gardening as much as possible, with the exception of about January and February outside. Those are 2 months that are brutally cold, and I say brutally cold lightly because you northern people are like, you don't know what cold is. I do not like cold. That's why I live here. So with the exception of growing in January and February, because I do not have a greenhouse, high tunnel, any kind of coverage like that. We just do low tunnels if needed for frost or for deep freezes and such like that. But those are very rare in my area. We actually live in West Tennessee and we can almost grow year round, like I said, with the exception of January and February, which I could if I had a high tunnel. But I'm not getting into all that because not everybody has that. So first of all, in planting a garden, you want to say, what the heck do I want to plant? So get a piece of paper, write down, if you are just starting out, pick 4 things. Pick 4 things that your family eats all the time, which is probably going to be something like tomatoes, some form of bean, maybe cucumbers, maybe something easy like, let's say, some herbs. Maybe you want to start some herbs. Let's just go with that one. Okay, so you want to write down some stuff. And then you're like, well, when do I plant them? So for most packages, on the back of the seed packages, if you start from seed, they are going to mostly describe the planting season for the spring or for anything between February to May in your zone. So if this is a first or beginner garden, like I said, just pick 3 or 4 things and at least get your feet wet on either starting seeds or buying plants from the store. Most of the time, the stores or local nurseries around your area are going to have the plants that you need in your area for a specific time frame. So be on the lookout for those, but also learn to read the back of your seed packets. Now, like I said, I'm going to go through a year-round kind of layout for certain things. Now, also go back, remember to watch the video on why you plant things when, because this is not going to be zone specific. There's no way that I can give you zone specific because there could be a 2-month variation in certain zones. And there are certain zones that can't grow anything of a certain vegetable or fruit. Like Florida and Texas, a lot of them have trouble with growing lettuces or cool weather plants because they're so hot. Well, the north may have a harder time growing okras and corn and such like that. You may be able to, but you'll have a harder time because of your growing zone being so cold and such a shorter growing period for those hot vegetables or the warmer weather vegetables. But here in the middle, we can almost grow year round, and I want to give you kind of a outlook on how I plan my garden. So since we've moved to the new homestead, I am starting out fresh, like most of you are if you're new gardeners or if you have a new homestead. So we've got to create our garden, and I've already been outside. You guys have seen where we set the coop up, and I'm actually going to kind of build the garden around the chicken coop. So my little chickens behind us are having a heyday back there. So that way, whenever I do my garden clean out, or I find rotten vegetables or damaged vegetables, you know, bugs or splits or something like that, I can just toss it to the chickens and go ahead and get that compost started. I do compost in place for my drops. You can just drop leaves on the ground and they compost in place as long as they are not disease ridden. But I'm also doing the chicken compost where they're composting everything, and I scoop out the chicken coop or the run, and I put it back into my garden. So it's just taking care of itself out there with the garden to be positioned around the chickens. I know you see a lot of homesteaders doing that, so keep that in mind if that's something that you want to do. Now, in my layout of my garden, I went ahead and drew out kind of a layout, and I don't know dimensions as of yet, so I can't give you dimensions until we go out there and actually measure and figure out where it's going. So this is just a rough draft on what I want started. Now, that also being said, I may not have all this year, so this is going to be a growing project. Don't think that if you are a new gardener or have a new homestead that you are going to have everything the first year. Because when I lived at my last homestead in the city, it changed every single year. I grew more stuff. I added more beds. I did a lot of different things. So keep that in mind as you are getting into starting your gardens, or if you have an area where you can grow, that things are going to change. But the first thing you need to do is figure out what you want to grow. So write a list down of things that you want to grow. Now this can be a list of every single thing you want to grow, from onions to beets to carrots to any leafy vegetables to tomatoes. You know, just throw everything out there. Just write it all down, because you're going to have to go through, and for your zone you have to figure out when or if you can even grow that. Okay, so you need to write down everything that you are wanting to attempt to grow this year, and write down what you need to start indoors and when, and what you need to start outdoors. Now, I have actually started doing this, and I like to garden by the holidays. Since we can pretty much grow year round, I like to garden by the holidays, or by birthdays, or by anniversaries, or something easy to remember. I don't want to do this, I have to start January 15th, or I have to start this March 26th. That is not sustainable. Gardening by specific dates is not sustainable in the long run when you're trying to remember what to do. If you have a journal and you write stuff down, do that. I am not a journalist. I don't write nothing down. This is actually the second time I've only ever written anything down, and this is really just to show you guys. This is kind of a guideline to also help me do a garden layout, which I'll get to in a minute. So we want to get a sheet of paper, and we want to write down January. This is January, so we're going to start with January. Yes, it's almost over, but most of us aren't doing a whole lot in January anyways. So January, of course, is when we're going to start. And if you guys can see my paper here, we are going to start with doing these right here. These are going to be indoors. So this is onions, onions, celery, and leeks. Now, those are what I am starting indoors that will be transplanted out about between March and April. But if you are wanting to do those items between zones maybe 6 and 8ish, then that'll be where you're going to start. So onions and celery and leeks, those will be what you start indoors. Now this is just starting them by seed. This is not transplanting them out, because depending on your growing zone, your growing area, if you have like a heat mat, or if you just have grow lights or something like that, they're going to grow at different rates, and that's going to have to be something that you learn inexperience on how long something takes to grow. Most things are going to be anywhere between 4 and 8 weeks, and that's something you've got to grow on. You've got to learn in your grow space, because you're going to have some things you're going to add and you don't want to run out of space. Some things is going to be taken out before you start something else, and you're going to be swapping out trays. So that's also something you're going to be looking at as well. So for January, we start indoors the onions, the celery, and the leeks. We do not start anything outdoors because pretty much the ground is frozen, or it's just too cold to even start anything. And also the sun is very limited at this point, because December 23rd-ish, between 23rd, that's whenever you have the winter solstice, which is actually the shortest day of the year. So from that date on into the spring, your days are going to be getting longer. So January is going to be one of the shortest growing times, and frankly, everybody's probably going to be frozen. So in February, we're going to move on to February, because that's what we're coming up on. This is what we've got to plan for. So in my zone, 7A, B-ish, between like zone 6 to zone 8, this is kind of what you're going to be planning for. Maybe some zone 5. We are going to be starting indoors. These right here. So it's going to be our broccolis, our Brussels sprouts, cabbages, cauliflower, some chards, some herbs that take a long time like rosemary, kohlrabi, some leaf lettuce or head lettuce. You might want to be thinking about your peppers and your spinaches. Now, a lot of these, such as, well, not a lot, but lettuce, spinach, some kales, I like to just direct sow them. And do broadcast sowing, where I just kind of sprinkle it and it kind of comes up where it comes up. Some people like to do one sprig of lettuce, seed per plant, and they just have it all lined up and pretty and all that stuff. However you decide to do that determines whether you start them indoors or whether you direct sow them. Okay, so for February, my key holiday is going to be Valentine's. My next holiday is going to be Emma's birthday, which is the 21st. So between usually Valentine's and Emma's birthday is when I am starting on getting these started indoors. Now, usually by Emma's birthday, so about Valentine's Day, I'm also going to be starting outside direct sowing, like sweet peas, English peas, sugar daddies, snap peas, those kinds of things. It is actually going to be started outdoors. Now you need to decide where they're going and if they are bush or vining. That's going to be important. So in our area, usually my calendar, by Emma's birthday, I have sweet peas set out. So she's my sweet pea. So that is some information to get you started for February. If this is kind of a list for you and you're able to grow these in your zones. Now moving on to March. So between March and April, we start getting busy because this is when most people are going to be starting seeds indoors and direct sowing. All right, so for March is going to be my St. Patty's Day. We've got St. Patrick's Day, and then we've got Stephen's birthday. We've got my nephew's birthday. So we've got a few birthdays right there between the 17th and about the 25th. That is my week to keep my mind on what I'm doing outside and what I'm doing inside. So inside for me is going to be starting some of my shorter growing, usually about my 8-week vegetables. And so this will be like my tomatoes and my cucumbers. That'll be towards the end of March because those won't go out until about May 1st. Now, back to your frost dates. Don't forget to check your frost dates. Your last frost date is the average date for your area, which determines your zone on when items can be planted outdoors. So you take that last frost date and go back the set amount of time for each of these vegetables. My last frost date is April 1st, which I give it until April 15th. So between April 1st and April 15th is when I'm safe to count back for when I need to start my certain vegetables. So usually between the 17th and the 25th, that's a good time for me to start my 4-week vegetables, which is going to be like my tomatoes, my cucumbers, and some of my summer squashes. Now keep in mind, you don't want to plant your items too early and they grow too big and run out of room, and then you have to up pot them, and then you're waiting for them to go outside and they start taking up too much room. So always add about 2 weeks to your frost date, so that way you don't run yourself out of room and you don't have anywhere for your vegetables to go. Also in March is going to be a lot of our root vegetables and a lot of our leafy vegetables. So here I've got carrots, beets, collards, turnips, kales, kohlrabis. You can direct sow kohlrabi outside, even though if you wanted to start some indoors, you can. So in March, you can actually direct sow. So a lot of these are going to be duplicates, whether you decide to start them indoors or whether you decide to direct sow them. Some leafy lettuces, onion sets. If you order your sets, or if you started them by seed, this is when you're going to plant them outside. So your onion sets go outside during the month of March. You also have some sweet peas if you want to go ahead and plant them, and then radishes and spinach. So again, this is your springtime vegetables that are going to take you through until it gets too hot. Now, moving on, April. So we got April Fool's Day to Tax Day. April 1st to the 15th. That's my holidays for the month of April. And what we are doing indoors would be, again, our squashes, if we want to go ahead and start our squashes. Some of our faster growing herbs, such as like your basils, if you want to go ahead and plant those indoors. And also your winter squashes. You want to go ahead and get your winter squashes going with your summer squashes, because like I said in the previous video, those do grow together. And your watermelons, cantaloupes, anything like that. Those are fast growing. So between April Fool's Day and Tax Day, we are starting these seeds indoors. What goes outside? So then we start planting on some of our root vegetables, such as our potatoes and carrots. Those go outdoors around April. And then we can also start some of our early growing, a little more frost hardy items outside, such as some beans, some of the beans that take a little bit to grow where the frost is not going to hurt them as much. And then of course your Swiss chard and your cucumbers. Now you can also start your cucumbers back in March, or you can direct sow them in April. So keep that in mind as you are writing this stuff down. Go ahead and write duplicates, because just in case you don't have room indoors, you know when to start them outdoors. And then here comes May. May is kind of blank because most things are going to be started indoors and transplanted, or they're going to be direct sowed. May is usually the time when just about everything is going out, unless you are super cold up north, or if by May you are too hot to even worry about it at this point. So in May is whenever we plan on planting like our winter or summer squashes direct sow outdoors. We can also direct sow corn and okra. Now, I haven't got this list finished for the fall, but for the earlier springtime, those can also cross over to usually anytime after, say, August in my zone. So for like July and August, that's when I'm going to be planning on my cabbages and my broccolis and that such. When it's too hot outdoors, I start those indoors. So those are going to be started indoors, and usually anything about August or after, like August, September, those cold items, I can go ahead and start direct sowing them, such as the carrots and the spinach and the lettuces and all that. When it gets to start cooling off, that's when you want to put everything back outdoors, direct sow, to allow the germination of the warmth of the soil to go ahead and get that started. And then as the temperatures cool off, they won't be so hot that they can't grow. Part 2 to this.